The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website.
Hi everybody, on this segment of Live and Learn, we're going to be talking about Medicare and Medicare Advantage and how you navigate the confusing issues. Stay tuned.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Masters. Jina Ragland is joining us today to provide us updates about what's been happening in the Nebraska legislature as it relates to caregiving. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to Live and Learn. I'm your host, Jerry Renaud. It is the 50th anniversary of the Lincoln Community Foundation Gardens Concert Series. Here to talk to us about that concert series and a little bit about what's happening at the foundation is Chip DuBuse. He is the Vice President for Development and Legacy Planning. It'll be great, don't go away.
The most desirable trees in Lincoln are changing due to insect problems, diseases, and the change of climate. I'm Doug Jost, your host for Live and Learn. Stay tuned for an update on the emerald ash borer and some tips on what trees you should be planting.
This and more on today's Live and Learn.
Hi everybody, welcome to Live and Learn. My name's Kim Hachiya. It's my pleasure and privilege to thank the professionals at Aging Partners and at LNK TV for producing the show today. We just really appreciate their hard work in putting this show together. You know, my show today is going to be sort of interesting. My guest is Molli Stollz, and she is benefits counselor at Aging Partners, and we're going to discuss one of the most challenging issues that face older adults, and that's choosing a health plan. So, Molli, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you know, I mentioned that choosing a health plan is between Medicare and Advantage plans and all those things, for some reason incredibly challenging. I don't know why, but it was for me anyway. So as a benefits counselor, you've been helping folks navigate this sort of impenetrable maze for quite a while. So why is this so hard?
Yes, there's just a lot of misinformation out there. It's really difficult to know what the best option is, where to go for resources, and it's just hard to sort through the mailings and the phone calls and the emails that you're getting.
Yeah, the mailings in particular. It's like we're starting to maybe get into the season where your mailbox is just filled with nothing but strange plans, and then you see the those ads.
Yes.
All the ads on TV, particularly with Jimmy Walker going, "It's free."
Yes.
And that is kind of misleading, isn't it?
It definitely is. Most of the Advantage plans don't have an additional premium, but you're still paying for the Medicare premiums as well as copays when you go to the doctor or drug costs. So nothing's truly ever free.
Right, and you know, there's that thing that if it's free, if it's too good to be true, probably. So
yeah.
Let's do just a quick rundown of terms. Define Medicare and the supplements and Advantage, and we could talk about that for 3 hours. We have 13 minutes.
So Medicare is, you have your Medicare A and your Medicare B, which are pretty much everyone has to have those. So Medicare A is your inpatient hospitalization coverage. It's typically premium free for people as long as they've worked and paid into the system for 10 years. And then you have your Medicare Part B, which is your outpatient coverage. That's going to typically cost you about $174 a month. And then you get to choose if you want to add a Medicare supplement and a drug plan. So a supplement is a policy sold by a private insurance company, varying degrees of cost and coverage. And that is going to cover the 20% that Medicare A and B don't. And then you add on a drug plan. That's going to vary both in premium and copay based on medications. The alternative to that is a Medicare Advantage, also known as Part C. And that is also sold by private insurance companies. And those plans sort of roll everything into one. So that insurance company is going to be in control of Medicare A and B and drug coverage, and they get to determine what things are covered, how much it's going to cost, and every plan is just a little bit different. There's multiple plan options in Nebraska, so it's kind of tough to sort through all of those options.
Right, and so sometimes Advantage is not. And do you want to talk about that? Because I know that there's a lot of controversy about how some hospitals or some doctors or some locations don't take Advantage plans, and so you're kind of in a rock, right?
Yes, so an Advantage plan is very enticing, and it's also very nice because there is no additional premium attached to it. So for people who are relatively healthy, it's nice to save $150 extra a month. And then it's also nice, maybe you only see your primary care once a year for a yearly checkup. You don't pay for that. And then you've got extra benefits built in, like dental, vision, over-the-counter medications. Typically, you have a stipend to pay for those, whereas you don't get that with an original Medicare supplement plan. So it's really nice to have some extra benefits built in. However, there are networks that we have to pay attention to. Not all doctors are in network, not all hospitals are in network. If you're traveling, you have to know what your networks look like, where you can go if you have an emergency. So emergency rooms are always covered. It's when you get moved out of those emergency rooms that we have to be mindful of what your networks look like. The Advantage plans also, as they're controlled by the insurance company, the plan has to authorize pretty much every treatment and procedure that's non-emergent. So I know a lot of people get really frustrated with that process and denials and appealing those denials, and physicians and hospitals sometimes just say we don't want to deal with that. So before picking, you need to make sure that your doctors are in network and the hospitals that you want to go to are in network. Whereas with Medicare supplement, right, you're paying that extra premium per month. Typically, all you have is a $240 deductible, and then no more copays. You're covered in any other state just as you would be in your home state. As long as your providers take Medicare and they accept Medicare assignment, you don't run into issues with denials typically, or networks. They're going to take your supplement if they take Medicare. So it's a little more seamless with the original Medicare.
So it is kind of hard though, because it's hard to anticipate what an emergency might be.
Yes.
And it's also, if you're a person who does travel or, likes to do different things, you have to kind of be aware of that. And that's kind of a bummer to think that, okay, I really want to go to Colorado this year, but I guess my insurance won't pay for it. So
yeah, yes, it's just mindful to it's important to be mindful of what are my travel plans going into retirement. The other piece of this where we run into issues, sometimes you can get stuck in an Advantage plan, or stuck in a Medicare supplement, because we're running into issues right now where Medicare supplement plan Fs were discontinued after 2020. And so they're incredibly expensive, but people need the coverage and they don't want to flip maybe to an Advantage plan for, their provider access or whatever that looks like. And now they're paying $200-300 a month for a premium, and what do we do?
Right.
Same goes for an Advantage plan. If you start out in an Advantage plan, you're in it for longer than what's called a trial period, which is a 12-month time frame that you can be in that Advantage plan. If you're in it longer than that and then you have some health issues come up, we can't always get you into a supplement later on. And so we run into issues where people are getting sent maybe to the Mayo Clinic and their plan won't cover it, or something's not authorized. And so it's important just to know what those trial periods look like, how they could affect you down the road, because I get a lot of people who say, I'm really healthy now, I don't want to spend the premiums, and then what happens? Or, the premiums are low right now, and in 10 years they're going to be outrageous, and so I can't afford it. So it's just kind of important to navigate through all of that.
But for some people, one plan idea is better than other, so it's not like they're all terrible.
Right.
And, or they're all good.
Right.
It's just it takes a lot of thinking, and so if people need help, how do they find it?
Yes, so it's really important, I say, to consult your physicians. Pretty much every provider is going to have an opinion. They'll be able to tell you what plans they accept, what plans they don't. And then you can go seek out unbiased advice. So Aging Partners is happy to help with that. There's 2 benefits counselors, myself and a part-time person. And then Nebraska SHIP, the Senior Health Insurance Program, is an unbiased source you can reach out to. There's one in Lincoln. And then there's also the CMS website, or the Medicare.gov website, where you can find tons of information. It's all unbiased, it's just the facts.
I know you and I had also talked about the AARP.
Yes.
Even though they do offer different kinds of plans, they do a pretty good job, and you can find their information online, I think.
Yep.
So, yeah. So if you had maybe 2 or 3 pieces of advice for people that are just starting to navigate or thinking about it or planning, what would you tell people?
Yeah, I would tell people to go have a meeting with Aging Partners or SHIP get online, look at your resources. Every year you're going to get mailed a Medicare and You booklet. It's pretty dense, it's pretty thick, but just do some research, do some homework, look into options, talk to your friends or trusted people, providers of course, just to see what makes sense for you. So you have an idea coming in.
Right. So this is really kind of a confusing topic. Tell me how you got interested in being involved in that.
Yeah, so I started out, I was a rehab social worker at Tabitha for about 4 years, and then I saw this job come available and I moved. I'd really gotten to see Medicare in a practical sense at Tabitha, how it plays out, how those benefits and those plans affect people. And then when I got this job, I was able to get my insurance agent license, and I was able to do training through Nebraska SHIP to really get a full understanding of how do you enroll, what your plan options are, and then I've also seen the practical side of it.
It must be pretty rewarding to be able to help people in kind of this real on the ground way, because it is really confusing, and just having the base knowledge that you have, and you are a approachable, friendly person, and you're able to just say, here's a better idea, or have you thought of this? And I think that must be rewarding for you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you have any idea how many people you guys help on an annual basis?
It's hard to say. I think it's probably, like 500 or 600, I would say, between Medicare open enrollment and then just general retirees. I would say that's probably pretty
And I
accurate.
know that maybe the upcoming summer issue of Living Well magazine is going to have an article that you've written talking about this, with kind of going over the same stuff we've gone over and giving sort of websites and phone numbers and places to go. So I think the face-to-face is probably the most helpful, but starting with the websites is also pretty good.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, so thanks.
Yes.
I think we probably have a minute or two left, but I think we're just going to say we have covered this the best we can, because there's no way you could do the big deep dive.
Right.
Because it really is sort of, it's thick water.
It is.
Anyway, so thank you for being my guest. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I want to remind our viewers it's never too late to live and learn.
My kid has been asking for this hot new gaming thing, and I was like, okay, he had a birthday coming up anyway. So I finally find the video game online, in stock. Thing is, it was from this shoddy website full of typos. That's when I remembered a tip I got from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Bogus website, this is a shopping scam. Got us matching t-shirts instead.
Recognize fraud sooner,
He loves his.
so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Masters and welcome to Live and Learn. It is a great pleasure to have Jina Ragland, the Associate State Director for AARP Nebraska, with us today. Jina has agreed to return and tell us a little bit about the latest legislative updates. So Jina, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Julie.
Oh,
Happy to be here.
Well, we are just so thrilled and delighted, and it's just a gift, so thank you. Thank you. So Jina, you know, I think a question that sometimes our viewers wonder, and I certainly do, how much do family caregivers provide support to loved ones in Nebraska?
Great question, and a massive question, Julie, and we could probably talk all day on this, but AARP has done a lot of research on family caregiving. I think there's a lot of dynamics that go into family caregiving, but I think what's offset all of this the most, since 2011 we've seen a huge increase in our aging population and our baby boomers and the over 65. Which has put a burst on the healthcare system, which is already, we're lacking different health professionals in different areas. And so we've had a lot of family caregivers who had to step up and actually care for a loved one to keep them in their home, and that. We truly say they are the backbone of our healthcare system. They allow people to age in place. And even for our younger people who might need caregivers at home, that's still called an aging in place, because again, it keeps them in the home at the lowest level of care. I think it's important to note, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the legislation that was passed, but I think the biggest thing that we see, family caregivers provide support to their loved ones because it's what they do, especially in Nebraska. We just do that. It's the right thing to do. But we've seen it create financial burdens and emotional hardships for many people. And again, on average, we typically see caregivers spending about 26% of their own money out of their own pocket to provide care, even if they're getting assistance from other programs. And typically that's about $7,242 annually that people are spending, again, out of their own pocket. So that financial hardship, creates some burden, especially for sandwich caregivers who might be caring for a loved one in their home, but also providing care to their own children as well. So I think the other thing I would note is we do know, based on some studies, there's about 179,000 unpaid family caregivers in Nebraska. My opinion is I know that number's a lot more, but that's just what we've been able to identify. But the other startling piece of all of that is those 179,000 unpaid family caregivers are providing 168 million hours of care that's unpaid, and economically that's valued at $2.8 billion. So if you put that in perspective, those are the people caring for people in their homes. They're not relying on the state for assistance and those kinds of things. Financial burden is a huge aspect. And so again, I think that, again, kind of was an eye-opener for AARP about we need to find ways that we can look to support family caregivers, and how can we ease the financial strain that they're currently under.
Those numbers are extraordinary. And you really, the way you've described it, you've made caregiving real for unpaid family caregivers in Nebraska. So the last time that we had the good fortune to talk about updates, you mentioned something about LB 937. Could you tell us about the bill and what's been the outcome? Thank you.
Absolutely, and it's fun to come back because we did start, and at that time, the bill was kind of stuck in the committee and hadn't actually moved to the floor. But I am happy to report that we were able to move the bill forward. It's called the Nebraska Caregiver Tax Credit Act. And I would be remiss if I didn't call out Senator Elliott Bostar from here in Lincoln Legislative District 29. He kind of took this and led this through the committee, got it to the floor, he prioritized the bill, and we were able to kind of move it through. It did envelope a few other tax credit bills inside of that, but primarily LB 937 was the vehicle bill. And under that, and you can kind of see here up on the screen, but beginning January 1st, 2025, anyone that's paying into income taxes or has an income tax that they're paying in and is providing care or support for an eligible loved one, they would be eligible for a non-refundable tax credit. I think it's important to note there's two different ways that you can acquire that. You can either be a family caregiver and receive up to $2,000 tax credit, or if you're caring for a family member that's a veteran or has a diagnosis of some sort of dementia, you can get up to $3,000. Again, non-refundable, so you have to be paying in to actually be eligible for that. The other thing to note is the amount of the credit has to be equal to 50% of the eligible expenditures that are incurred during that taxable year by a family caregiver. And then, as I've said, and I just want to read again, it's a non-refundable, so you don't get money back. It will go against the taxes that you're paying into. The other thing I would note here is this is an important concept, again, and we'll kind of talk about this on the next slide, but we did end up having to do some compromising because the cost could be fairly large. And so part of the way that the bill passed, the first 2 years, the bill will cap at $1.5 million that's available to Nebraskans. And then on year 3, it will cap at $2.5 million and move forward. I think for me, the biggest thing now is the education piece, is making sure people understand that it's available. Again, you can't claim it until technically 2026 because that's when you would file your 2025. But I think one thing that's really important for people to understand is starting in January 2025, if you are eligible for this, you need to start putting the paperwork together, saving your receipts, getting the verification and all of that, so you're ready to go January 1st of 2026. Again, with the cap, it's a first come, first serve. We wanted more money, but this is what we were able to acquire. And so I think the other important thing is if we don't use the money, eventually it could be taken back away, and we would not hate to see that happen from caregivers.
I'm just curious, what has been the reaction of the caregiving community to this news?
I think a lot of people, again, are thrilled. And I think the other thing that we find when we're out talking in the community is some people don't associate themselves as that definition of what a caregiver is. And so when we start talking about that, they're like, oh, that is me. and hey, this would really be helpful. I think one note, AARP tends to focus on 50 and older, but we know caregivers, there are people that are much younger than that that are also providing care. And so I think that's another important aspect of this bill, is that there's no age restrictions. So you can be providing care for someone 20, and still, if you qualify with the different requirements, you can still be receiving that.
That's terrific.
So the other thing I wanted to mention, Dr. Masters, is that eligible family members or individuals, you have to have at least 2 activities of daily living that you're receiving assistance with. So that's one of the qualifications. You have to have 2 of those. You also have to qualify as a dependent, a spouse, or a parent, or other relation by blood or marriage to the family caregiver. And the other thing is they can't be living in an assisted living, a long-term care, congregate, any of those types. They have to be living in an independent residence. The other thing I would mention is there also are some income guidelines that had to be put into play. Again, all caregivers we think are deserving of this, but again, when you work through the legislature, sometimes there's some compromise that has to be put into play. And so the other important thing to know is if you're a caregiver, your income would have to be, for a single person, under $50,000, and for a married joint filing couple, under $100,000. So the other thing I'll just say in summary to this, we're going to be working with the Department of Revenue, who will be putting together what that application looks like. More will be coming. We'll be out doing education with people in the community, and trying to spread the word about that. But the other thing I like to say is Nebraska is now the 2nd state in the entire United States that has a comprehensive tax credit bill that we have passed. Unfortunately, Oklahoma beat us to it in 2023. But I will say also, Nebraska's bill is actually probably more comprehensive than Oklahoma, and the reason for that is we don't have that age restriction. Oklahoma has it, you have to be 62 and older to receiving the care. So go Big Red. Nebraska's number 2, but I still think we are still number 1 in the fact that this is much more comprehensive. So again, it's not just age related, it's for anyone that's providing care as a family caregiver.
Well, and I think it's important when you talked about younger family caregivers who may be caring, for instance, an aging parent, but they may also be caring for a child who has multiple health issues, that can be incredibly expensive, and the demands of that time. And so, again, to your point, great for Nebraska to have this legislation get passed.
Absolutely. We're finally at the top of it. We're not always at the bottom passing things last. So this was really exciting, and we are very thrilled to watch this roll out.
Well, and you think about the next 20, 30, 40 years, and you talked about the number of caregivers, those numbers will only increase, and so Nebraska, being ahead of the curve, is in an ideal place to be the leader in terms of caregiving. So AARP, without question, is a strong supporter of caregiving issues. And could you tell our viewers about the programming that AARP offers to caregivers, not only in the United States, but most importantly in Nebraska?
Sure, and again, we'll have a slide that'll come up here, and it'll kind of give you some reference for that. And there's a lot of information on here, and I'm just going to touch very basically. But yes, AARP supports family caregivers and their loved ones, both directly through programs and online resources, but most importantly, indirectly through our state and federal advocacy. So the things that you're going to see up here are, again, those direct things that you can look through programs, resources, and services. But I would point out is we do have a very comprehensive family caregiving website. The website is listed up there that you can go out and look at. I like to call it a one-stop shop in the aspect of it provides different tips and tools or categories that you can go to, that anything under the sun that you think might be affecting a caregiver. Some examples of that is handling medical issues, health records, advanced directives, home safety, maybe financial and legal issues, even caregiver life balance, and many other things. So not only just how this affects the caregiver, or the person receiving care, but you as the caregiver. How do you do that work-life balance as a sandwich caregiver? So there's lots of resources out there. We also have a family resource line that people can call using the phone, and we also have a Spanish line that you can access for that. If you'd rather just pick up the phone and you need to talk to someone, it's kind of the same concept as going on the resource, but you can actually connect with someone through that 800 line. And again, that number is listed up here on the screen. We do have caregiver resource directories and caregiving guides to help people if you haven't yet become a caregiver or you're just starting out. How do you prepare to care? Financial workbooks. We do have specific workbooks on working with veterans specifically as being a caregiver, and the military aspect of that. The other thing I would also, and again, you can find this out on our website, but we do have a Nebraska-specific caregiver resource guide that people can access. You can get it on the website, or you can actually download it, or you can actually have copies of it sent to you from by ordering those online or through the resource line as well. The other two things, real quick, we do have a family caregiver online community. Again, if you go out to that website, you can connect and talk to people online who are in a same or similar situation, kind of in a blog form. You post a question, other caregivers answer that. And then another really fun one is, if people haven't seen it, but we do have a Facebook discussion group that people can go out and access also kind of in the same similar fashion.
Well, it sounds like you have a wonderful lineup in terms of resources, both in person, and that's refreshing to hear, as well as online. So Jina, you've just done a brilliant job. There's no question that you are such a strong champion for caregivers, also aging Nebraskans without question. So Jina, a question that I always ask guests, and the last time you were here I asked this, but I'm going to ask it in a little different way. What do you see and what brings you hope when you think about the aging of the population in Nebraska and also for caregivers?
It's a hard question, Julie, but I think that the biggest thing for me, and again, I'm boots on the ground, so I'm working with this every day, but watching our older generations and our older populations and the intergenerational work that we're doing with our younger populations, removing some of the ageism that we've seen in the past, but bringing people all together and figuring out the end goal is all the same. I think what's most important and what I love to see is our livable communities that are starting to erupt. We're making our communities more livable again for our older population so they can stay at home. The transportation, the biking, the walking paths, that sort of thing. But I think probably the most important thing for me is the health factor of watching our older populations be healthier and live longer. And when you look at all of the aspects that we've talked about today, but even those in general, I think that they each have a puzzle piece that fits together and makes it whole. And so I think for us that we'll continue to do those things to help people expand their horizons. But quality of life and living longer and having the best quality of life, I think, is what is yet to come on the horizon.
Well, Jina, for our viewers, thank you for everything that you've done to ensure that the future is a bright one, not only for people as they age, but for caregiving. And you're just so much of a strong advocate, so thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. And to our viewers, remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
I was doing some shopping and got a pop-up on my laptop. Computer had a virus. So I called the number on the page, and the guy on the phone wants to take control of my screen to sort it out. Then I remember a tip I got from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Control my screen. This is a tech support scam. Thankfully, my order still went through.
Recognize fraud sooner so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
There you have just a little bit of a feel for some of the entertainment that is going to be at the Lincoln Community Foundation Gardens Summer Concert Series coming up in just a short while. Hello everyone and welcome to Live and Learn. I am your host, Jerry Renaud. We want to talk about that music series this summer, but we also want to talk about the Lincoln Community Foundation. We have a very special guest for us. It is Chip DuBuse, Vice President for Development and Legacy Planning at the Foundation. That's quite a title. Thank you for...
It's a longer title than it needs to be, but thank you for having me here.
Thanks for taking some time to come and talk about the series. It's always a fun time, and some of Lincoln's really finest musicians are going to be there. We want to talk about the series and some of the groups that are going to be there in just a little bit. But let's talk about the Foundation. When I was... everybody knows the foundation is there, but they really do some cool things, and they've been around for a long, long time. Tell us a little bit about the foundation.
I'll give you a snippet of history, because the foundation goes back to 1955.
Wow.
Actually, 40 people, business leaders, that got together in 54 and 55 and started the foundation. Many names that are on buildings around the community now are those 40. And it was a place where people could leave something, generally through their will back then, to support other things going on in the community, charity in the community, help people in the community. So that's what it was back in the 50s. It was originally called the Lincoln Foundation. Changed our name 20-some years ago to the Lincoln Community Foundation. And the other step of that is 9 years later in 1964, with a grant from the Woods Charitable Fund here in town, had money to build our building on Centennial Mall that's been there since 1964, originally called the Lincoln Center for Community Services. And it was really a meeting place for nonprofits, other organizations that wanted to support, and it's been the home since then to the Community Foundation.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know that if you have a nonprofit, and you can use the building on occasion and have meetings, and
we have a couple meeting spaces, especially a very large one upstairs many people have been into, for free. Actually, you go online now and reserve it and come and use it. It's a really great opportunity, and it's fun to have a lot of people in and out of the building.
Yeah, and I've recently met some of the folks there and starting to talk about what I'm going to do at some point in time. Tell me about your involvement. How did you get involved?
I'm an attorney by training. 40-some years ago, I was a trust officer for 25 years here in town. And 11 years ago, came over to the foundation. And I get to work with folks who want to help their community, want to do something in the community, want to help some charitable organization, are inspired to support something.
Must be nice.
And we help make that happen for them with their advisors and their families and everything else. So I get to help people really set up a charitable legacy.
Yeah,
that's our job. That's our mission.
It's a great opportunity, and it must be fun to see how those things work over the years and how they help the community.
And going back, we've been doing this since the 50s, and so it's been fun to see some of those things develop that have been around a long, long time, and then new people that are setting up things 20, 30 years down the road.
Very cool.
It's a lot of fun.
Let's talk about the Foundation Garden, and let's talk a little bit about the concert series. This just can't hardly believe this, but this is the 50th anniversary of music.
It is amazing that it's 50 years, and you'll see somewhere throughout this episode an image of the rendering that was originally done by Clark Anderson. Al Hammerski there actually was working on it, of what that garden was going to look like, and it was built in '73. There are some pictures of the dedication in October of '73. Very bare bones, very few, some bushes, but no trees, no anything. There's Bennett Martin Library in the background. There's all of those things. But the garden opened in fall of '73, and then we started that next summer in '74 having concerts in the garden Wednesdays at noon. And we've been doing it for 50 years.
And you know how that came about? What was the impetus for trying to do that?
It was to have a place where people could perform, and others, I believe early on, it was people tried to get on the list and kind of self-submitted themselves to be performing in that space. Many years later, it's moved, we kind of organize it and script it and actually produce. Right now we use Dean Heist at Arts Inc. has been a great partner to help us essentially produce. We have 18, 19 concerts going on. So it's been an exciting time to have all different kinds of music. You'll see some snippets as we cut away in the show, but there are some great names and new names and old names and all kinds of variety.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's a challenge. I mean, people are working, and to come down and perform for an hour on Wednesdays at noon. But if somebody was sort of interested, I mean, they're all the slots are taken. But if somebody, there are really some fine musicians in Lincoln, Nebraska.
All they need to do, let me know.
Okay.
You can find me at the foundation. There's only one chip there.
Okay.
And I'll pass that along to Dean and the team at Arts Inc. And they collaborate and they really program the concert with us. We give them a little ideas here and there. That's the way to get connected.
Okay, wonderful.
To the performing side.
Well, let's talk about this summer. We are recording this in May, so this will be airing in June. So we thought we would at least mention some of the early groups that are going to be there in May. Hopefully, people got a chance to come down and see them. Swing Fever kicks things off on May 22nd,
Right.
and
just next week.
That's next week, and that's my group, so I'm excited
That's
being able
great.
to open it off.
And then the next one, there's one on the 29th, and then a special concert on the 30th of May. Again, this is showing in June, but Give to Lincoln Day is May 30th, and there's always a special concert that we move over to Tower Square. So if you heard that there was a concert in Tower Square, as you're viewing this program, that's what it was all about. There was a concert, and there was also a festival of charitable organizations that are part of that Give to Lincoln Day, which people hear about.
And that is the Lightning Bugs. So we should give them just a little plug. That's a wonderful little three-piece old jazz with Steve Hansen and Jim Pfeiffer, and I think Reynold Peterson is with them. So that's really a fun group. We hope people got a chance to go to go see those. But let's talk about as we jump into June. That's kind of an interesting group that's going to be there. You have the Tidball Barger Band.
Right, they're a favorite and have been around for a long time, and people love hearing them. And we're following that with a special concert. A lot of people know the Lincoln Municipal Band from Antelope Park Band Shell. Generally July and August. I think that's when they generally perform, start about the 4th of July. But we're bringing them in for a special 50th anniversary concert. There's 33 musicians that'll be up on that little stage in the garden, so it'll be a wonderful day and a special time, and we'll have special popcorn, we'll have some special things going on the 12th. So that's a day that if you see this program, you have a chance to get down, come see the Lincoln Municipal Band. It'll be a fun one. Yeah. And
Orion Walsh is going to be there on June 19th. And Skylark is going to be there on June 26th. I used to be in Skylark as well. They're a really wonderful band, great vocalist. And we thought maybe we'd give people a little snippet of some of these folks and what they're going to sound like. So let's take a look at that right now. In the moonlight, in the midnight, in the moonlight, midnight, moonlight. Okay, let's move on to July. Some really fun groups coming. The Shucks Brothers is a bluegrass band. Really wonderful musicians in the Shucks Brothers. Bee and the Boppers I don't know much about, but they're a little jazz trio.
They're a little jazz trio, exactly. And then followed by the Melody Wranglers. There's
they're lots of fun because it's just fun country. But it's country, but it's really fun, and they're just really excellent musicians. Then we have the Oasis Bluegrass Band, and they're lots of fun. And then Paddywhack, which performs a lot around town, and they're an Irish group. So they're also lots of fun to listen to. So why don't we just take a little snippet, and we'll look at listen to some of the bands that will be there in July. I'm a native of the soil. If you want to taste the version, I'll take you out in style. My car is painted red and green, the North Dakota Star. The pride of Dublin City is my Irish mountain car. Okay, Okay, let's move on to August. Again, lots of really fun, different kinds of music that's coming in August, starting with Janet Jeffries.
Janet Jeffries has performed for a number of years and has a great following, and it's been just a lot of fun. A little different. Bobby Gadori follows up next. That's a more straight line jazz.
Right. Yeah, he's just
approach.
fabulous.
And then the Midnight Wanderers after that, very different.
Yes, they are.
But
they're real
great.
popular. They play a lot around town. I think they end up at some of the wineries.
Yes.
So they're really lots of fun.
And we just had an artist that had to switch, and so on August 28th is the Nebraska Brass.
Oh,
so
very
yet
good.
Another genre coming
Oh, yeah.
in, and they do all kinds of fun stuff.
Oh yeah, that'll be
So
great.
it'll be a great.
That'll be
great time to
wonderful.
do that.
Let's take a quick listen and look at some of the groups that might be performing or will be performing in August. And we're still playing music in September,
Yes, we are.
which is nice. And again, there are 3 performances: Crabgrass Bluegrass, lots of fun on September 4th.
It's very good.
Yes, very good. And then the McGovern String Band, really talented musicians, will be there on September 11th. And then the last concert, just 2 of my favorite musicians with Jackie Allen and Hans Sturm. It's called Bass Meets Voice.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure what that's going to be like, but I know it's going to be great.
They performed in the past. They're really talented. Really,
Oh, yes.
really great. And it's been fun to stretch the concerts into September. They always used to stop in August, and to run them in September, the best weather almost ever in Nebraska. So it's fun to have them.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick listen and look to some of the music that you will be hearing in September. It is a fabulous lineup. I'm sure it's going to be a great success. And again, if somebody doesn't know where the Foundation Garden is, tell us where it is.
Come on down behind our building at 15th, which is Centennial Mall, and N Street. So it's around the corner behind our building. 1415N is actually the address, I just learned. But it's behind us, and it's a great spot, and easy access. There's ramps, there's railings, there's all kinds of things. So everybody can come. Everybody can scoot around and find a place to sit on the steps, or bring your chair, or we'll have chairs, and come on down and have a great time. I don't want to get past this without thanking the folks who make this. We've been doing this for 50 years. We've been working with Arts Inc. for a long period of time, but there are people, I call them the neighbors, that have also been sponsors for this for many, many years. And it's Windstream, it's actually from Tidball Barger Band, Pam Barger, and her piano students of hers, Bob and Barbara Bartle, our former president of the Community Foundation. Eagle Printing has done some work for us. Farmers Mutual, the Nebraska Arts Council has stepped in again. The Pearl Francis Finnegan Foundation supports a lot of performing arts groups around. And then next door is Pinnacle Bank. Next door is Windstream. A block away is U.S. Bank and Woods and Aiken Law Firm. So all of those neighbors have really come together to help us make this thing happen. It's a lot of fun.
That's great. So we thank them, and and thank you for spending some time with us today. I'm sure it'll be a great success, and it will continue for another 50 years maybe.
I hope so. Let's keep her going.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thanks.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in. I'm your host, Jerry Renaud. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
So, I'm playing with the dog, and I get this robocall from the Social Security Administration saying my card had been suspended and I had to call them back immediately. And that's when I remembered a tip from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Random robocall? This is a Social Security scam.
Recognize fraud sooner,
Robots.
so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Welcome to Live and Learn. The tree canopy in Lincoln is diminishing due to a number of factors like insects, climate change, and changing species. Today we'll talk about that and what's coming up. My guest today is Justin Evertson from the Nebraska Arboretum. Welcome to Live and Learn.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here. I love talking trees. So.
Well, that's the main thing we need to talk about first is the emerald ash borer.
Yeah.
Is it approaching Lincoln? Is it here?
Yeah.
What's the situation?
Yeah, emerald ash borer is here, and it's munching on a lot of trees across the city now. It arrived about 5 or 6 years ago. As it was eating its way across eastern United States, it arrived in Nebraska, and now it's really, they call it the death curve has arrived to the ash trees in eastern Nebraska, including Lincoln and Omaha. So it's been here several years, and now we're starting to see pretty rapid decline of trees that have EAB in them, emerald ash borer.
So is treatment feasible for emerald ash borer?
Yes. If you have a healthy ash tree that you want to hold on to, anybody should know that yes, they can treat that tree, keep it alive for a lot of years to come. I would hire a certified arborist who knows what they're doing because they have to use proper chemicals, and if it's a big tree, they have to inject the tree, and they have to do that every 2 to 3 years. But you could keep a tree alive for a long time if you do it properly. And in fact, if you want to start treating in Lincoln, you better start now.
So how do you determine whether you should or should not do that? Are there any indicators that how healthy the tree is?
Yes, and there's a good publication online. They can go to the Nebraska Forest Service website, and it has a great guide for homeowners to think about their tree. But generally, if you look at it, and it looks like a pretty healthy tree, not a lot of dead in it, and it has good structure, and it's giving you good shade, doing good things for you, it's worth treating. You might want to hire an arborist or somebody, if you're not sure, to come give it an assessment. You can sure do that. A lot of people are choosing to not treat their trees, realizing that they'll have to treat it forever, and that's also a fair decision based on a personal homeowner.
I mentioned that the canopy in Lincoln and area is diminishing, and let's talk about that. What species are a problem right now other than the ash borer?
Yeah, well, definitely the ash trees. As I drove over here this morning through central Lincoln, I counted at least 20 ash trees clearly in my vision that were in decline. The other big tree that we're losing now fairly rapidly across especially central and older parts of Lincoln is the pin oak. The pin oak was planted by the thousands new construction sites 60 to 80 years ago. Every home got a pin oak. It seems like in some neighborhoods they're aging out, they're getting old. It's a little bit of a tough tree to grow in eastern Nebraska because it doesn't like our soils so well, but they're starting to age out. And I got an assessment from a friend who works with the city of Lincoln the other day, and they've, in the last 5 years, taken out 12,000 trees that have died or are dying from emerald ash borer, pin oak decline, other insect issues, aging across the canopy. 12,000 trees in 5 years. So,
as we consider what species we should plant, what are the considerations before we get into the specifics here of species? Are there some criteria that we should think about?
Yeah, definitely. One of the big things we think about across the community is diversity of species. So instead of putting all our eggs in one basket, we had a problem when I was a kid 50, 60 years ago. American elm trees were dying rapidly from Dutch elm disease.
Exactly.
And every Nebraska community was loaded with lots and lots of American elms. Then we mostly replaced them with ash trees, and now they're starting to die. So the lesson has to be keep diversifying that community forest, plant a wide diversity of species so that we have a buffer and a resistance to these insects and diseases that might come along. And there's a lot of trees to choose from. So we could literally plant 100 different species or types across Lincoln if they were available from the nursery. That's the big one. We also want age diversity. We really do need to keep planting some trees every year. We seem to go in waves where we plant a whole bunch and then we rest, and then we plant a whole bunch and then we rest. we need to plant some every year so that when they start to age out, it's not so rapid a decline. Those are the two big things that I would suggest to you. And then in eastern Nebraska, so many people are smitten by evergreens. They go to the Colorado Rockies and they see those big evergreen planted mountains and they say, I want my place to look like a cabin in the mountains, and they plant all these evergreens in eastern Nebraska. Well, just be aware that evergreens are another group of trees struggling here in eastern Nebraska. So we just want to be careful not to plant too many evergreens if we're not selecting them properly. So,
well, let's talk about the deciduous trees then that you're recommending for replacement. What are there specific species or new ones that are coming along that have a lot of promise?
Yeah, thankfully Lincoln, a town like Lincoln, I come from western Nebraska. And when I arrived in Lincoln years ago to go to college, and I just saw the beauty of the trees across town, big old trees that Lincoln took great care of the residents to plant for a lot of years. And Lincoln is loaded with a lot of diverse tree species that we don't even think about going on in the background. So here's just a few species that really shine in town that you don't even know they're there. Chinquapin oak, for example. Northern pecan is a great tree to plant. Kentucky coffee tree. There are 3 or 4 other types of oak trees. Sugar maples. The list kind of goes on and on. So literally there could be 50 or so species and types of trees that we could be growing in Lincoln that are here, that they'll tell us they'll grow here, but they're not available in big numbers or don't get the gaudy attention that a red maple or some of these other trees get. So diversity of deciduous species.
You mentioned about the evergreens. Are you saying we shouldn't be planting evergreens, or is there still a place for evergreens?
Great question. Yes, there is still a place for evergreens. Just beware that one of the most common evergreens and loved evergreens for the last 60 to 80 years was the Colorado spruce. It is declining pretty rapidly in eastern Nebraska, and that's tied primarily probably to climate change because of our warmer summer nights and higher humidity, especially here in corn and agriculture country where there's a lot of irrigation going on.
Right.
So Colorado spruce is one I personally would not plant going forward, but there are other ones that we can think about. There are a really nice variety of pines, some spruces, and even fir trees. One of the most graceful trees that appears here in Lincoln and eastern Nebraska is the white fir, or the concolor fir, and it doesn't get planted nearly the numbers that a spruce does. Or Douglas fir. The Rocky Mountain Douglas fir, believe it or not, does really good here in Lincoln, and we hardly plant it. So yeah, there's a lot of evergreens to think about.
Yeah, the evergreens, the wilt is a real problem. Personally, I've lost a lot of Scotch pines and even jack pines with the wilt. Is that a continuing problem for evergreens?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned pine wilt. It came through 10 or 20 years ago, and it's still here, killing the Scotch pines and the Austrian pines that were planted across Nebraska in the millions. These trees exist in the millions out there, and we've lost hundreds of thousands of them across Nebraska, especially eastern Nebraska. So Scotch pine, Austrian pine, avoid those. But there are other pines to think about to try and grow. One of them is white pine, eastern white pine. One of them is southwestern white pine. Our native ponderosa pine is still a great tree to plant. Just beware that with evergreens, don't plant them tightly together where the diseases roll through the trees. Give them some spacing and let the wind blow through them, and that helps reduce the fungal problems.
What about I think Black Hills, or the pine?
Black Hills spruce.
Spruce, I mean,
yep,
yeah.
That's a good spruce. It's better than the Colorado spruce for our conditions.
So that then there's an opportunity here to diversify our...
Yes, diversify the tree canopy. Plant a wide variety of things.
We haven't mentioned flowering trees. I know from previous experience talking with you, you have a concern about, for example, the Bradford pears and so on, but is there still a place for flowering trees?
Yes, and thank you for mentioning Bradford pear. It's an ornamental pear tree that we have too many in the community. It's an invasive species now. There are great alternatives. There are lots and lots of crab apples, for example, which are a great alternative. And then there's one that people should be aware of, a native tree called our black cherry. It's a taller growing cherry tree, but great fall color and good spring flower. Yes, plant ornamentals, just make sure it's a good one and not an invasive species.
Let's talk about the culture. We're into spring now. When should we plant trees? I know the best time was probably 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
But what recommendations for when to plant trees?
Well, not right now is a good time. Very early spring. March and April are about the best time in the spring. Mid-May to late into June and July, it starts to get hot and dry. So I would get that planting done in March or April, and then maybe wait again until the fall when the weather cools off again and the trees are going dormant, September, October, November. Otherwise, you can plant throughout the summer a containerized tree. Just be aware, if you plant it during the summer, it's going to be, you're going to have to pay more attention to watering.
So keeping them watered, which leads me to the next question, the care of once you planted. Any tips here that you found that maybe we're neglecting or are a way to keep those trees growing?
Yeah, the number one thing is to plant it properly, and beware that people often plant the tree too deep. The tree's first lateral roots are just under the soil surface, and then we also often have circling roots that we got to deal with at planting time. So get those things right, and then your tree should be able to take off and grow well. Make sure it's properly watered, not overwatered, and then have somebody give you advice on good structure. If it's a shade tree, they often have competing leaders that can come out in a storm.
Right.
And so make sure the structure is right so that it's going to get up into the wind and tolerate the worst of our storm events. Some trees need to have a single leader going up as high as possible, and so work at that.
What about mulching?
Yeah, Doug, very good, Doug. Mulch those trees. Give them a wide mulch ring, 3 to 4 inches deep with mulch, out to the drip line of the tree if you can stand it. That's the best thing you can do for tree health, especially if it's in a lawn, is to have some mulch around it.
So out to the drip line.
Yep, the edge of the canopy of the tree where the water drips off the edge of the leaves and comes down. That would tell you about where it would want to have its mulch. Most people don't want to mulch that wide, but if you can, it's less mowing, the tree is healthier. You could plant things underneath the tree in that mulch zone. That's a good way to do it.
Any considerations on the type of mulch?
Just use a good wood chips or shavings. Usually there's some left over here locally by our own arborists doing work that are piled either with the City of Lincoln in the landfill or private companies here have it. That's the best stuff because you're recycling locally mulched trees. But you can go to a nursery and buy bagged mulch too, which is just fine. And some of the bagged mulch holds better because it's kind of shredded and it layers together. So that's nice.
Justin, thanks a lot for these pointers. I guess the bottom line you're telling us, or one of them, is that diversity. When we think about the trees, not just one type, but diversify.
Yeah, think about it across a community. If there's too many of something in your neighborhood, don't plant another one of those, you know. Pick something different. And pick shade trees. We really need to keep working at canopy shade across our neighborhoods. That captures the most stormwater, it does the most for shade and energy conservation, and we're losing our canopy slowly over time. So,
Justin, very interesting. Thanks a lot for those pointers and bringing this information to us.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, Doug.
Remember, it's never too late to live and learn about what's happening with our trees and how to counteract insects and diseases in terms of what you plant in your yard and area.